Even though I studied music in college, I've always been pretty terrible at actual musical analysis, at least in the proper academic Schenkerian sense of the word. I actually once turned in an essay on music analysis in college that got 26%, which needless to say was not a proud moment for me. It's for that reason that, even though I love writing orchestral music in my DAW, the thought of analysing proper orchestral sheet music has always been something that just fills me with trepidation, abject terror. Yeah, the list goes on. If you look around hard enough, you'll actually find that there are some pretty big Hollywood A-list composers that have given away project files and MIDI files for free. For my part, I recently came across some of the sheet music and actual MIDI project files which were shared by Lorne Balfe, who wrote the music for award-winning TV series His Dark Materials. So it took me a while, but I basically plugged in all of my orchestral sample libraries into these MIDI files, and I really learned a lot from the process. So with that in mind, here are 4 key lessons I learned from stealing Lorne Balfe's MIDI files. Alright, so this is basically what the MIDI file looks like. I made a few adjustments on my side compared to how it is in Lorne Balfe's version. Basically, I've given these little folders so you can see at a glance these are all the string shorts, these are all the string longs. These are all of his original track names, by the way, so you can kind of tell what VSTs he was using. And so basically I've gone through each channel and given it a sample library. Basically it's a mix of BBCSO core and also Pacific strings for the most part. So first of all, take a listen and see what it sounds like. So that's a quick snippet of what it sounds like. And this isn't using a top of the range sample library. So what I think it really goes to show is that you don't need super expensive set of sounds to get a really convincing orchestral fake mock-up. It really is all in the way that Lorne Balfe does this wonderfully beautiful, complicated orchestration. So one of the first and most interesting things I did when I looked at this was to really examine the structure of the piece. So you'll see up here I've done some markers, but to give you the TLDR, the piece has this kind of AABAA format with kind of an intro and an outro at either side. When I say A section, I mean this main kind of big theme where it's like da 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 da, and then the B section is kind of like a counter melody to that main theme. And for me, a big reason that the melody of this opening theme, the reason why it sticks in my head is because of this repetition. You basically get this main 4-bar melody 4 times throughout the piece. Even though we hear this melody repeated 4 times, you might think that would get boring, but that doesn't happen at all because the orchestral focus, I guess, of the piece is always changing. This first section of the melody, it's basically played pretty much almost entirely on the strings. In the second statement of the melody, we then have, again, a strong emphasis on the strings carrying the melody, but this time the brass also joins them in the main melody. You can see on the horns here, they begin to take the melody. After that, we are into this kind of bridge B section. It's kind of unrelated to the 2 main melodies that we've just heard, but it's kind of a transition to get us back to the melody eventually. One thing that's interesting about this, the string arrangement is still fairly dense here. There's much less of an emphasis on the big melody, obviously. You'll notice that these violin patches are conspicuously missing from this section. Also in this section we get a big emphasis on the big brass chords. I'll also speak more about the specific brass orchestration later because I think it's also really worth discussing. Here's what it sounds like. After that, we are back for 2 final statements of the melody. These are pretty simple. You again have the strings taking the main melody, but then we also, if you scroll down here, we will get the woodwinds coming in, and we'll get these long legato woodwinds that also play the melody with the main strings. And for the most part, these last two melodies are really firing on all cylinders. You have like, when we get to this last one, you'll also hear that we have the strings, woodwinds, and brass all on the melody. It's super bombastic, so take a listen. And throughout the section, you might have also noticed we have some extra tracks down here. These are mainly for the choir that come in for these last two sections. There's also a few other things like the una corda piano from the beginning that just kind of live down here. But yeah, that's pretty much the main form of the piece. Again, AA, B, AA, melody, melody, bridge, melody, melody. So something that I really struggle with in my orchestral composing journey, and I'm sure it's the same for many of you, is how do you use the woodwinds in a way that's effective and impactful? For this, I think it's really helpful to look at the way that Lorne Balfe has used the woodwinds in the second statement of our main melody. Essentially, we have like all staccato patches, and even though the woodwinds kind of just take a background kind of function in the statement of the melody, this is still a really intricate and beautifully orchestrated woodwind line. So here's what the woodwinds sound like all together by himself. So they have this really kind of like jaunty, lively energy, which definitely helps. And the way this is accomplished is that you kind of have like the flutes leading this kind of pseudo main melody. Basically, Lorne Balfe has put together not only a flutes A2 patch, which is like all the flutes in the orchestra playing together, but there's also a solo flute layered on top of that. And I think these are at octaves. So it's not straight octaves all the way through, but they play a melody line, like both lines are super similar, so it kind of creates this unified melody line. And then underneath that, we basically have the way it's orchestrated, it almost sounds like arpeggios, and this is using the oboe, clarinets A2, and bassoons A2. So really cool and impressive way of thinking about woodwinds, where you have like a main melody and then our arpeggio to back up the harmony, and all of this is only to act in the background to augment the feeling of the second statement of the melody. We do have some more woodwind action towards the end of the piece, but it's a little bit less exciting. As I mentioned, the last two instances of the melody are really firing on all cylinders, and a big part of that is having the woodwinds legatos taking the main melody along with the strings and the brass. Pretty self-explanatory, I think. One final thing that I thought was really interesting about this piece of music is the way that Lorne Balfe has done his big brass chords. They're really quite intricate and involved, so let's take a closer look at them. So when I think of writing like huge, big, epic, big brass for an orchestra, I usually just do like big, huge horn chords, but he has a different approach to it, which I think is really interesting. So if you look at the MIDI for this one, you can see that the main chords are actually being taken by the brass trombone down here. And then he kind of has like a brass bass line using the tuba, which plays this monophonic, much lower kind of bass line, which goes like this. And the thing that's really beautiful about that is that then you actually have all of the horns freed up to play kind of more melodic harmony lines, and that's basically exactly what happens here. So when we put it all together, you have the chords in the bass trombone with a bass line from the tuba, and it's only after we get a few bars of that do we actually hear the horns come in, and they are freed up to perform more of a melodic function. They also have some lower notes to really underscore the harmony, which I think works phenomenally well. So if we just listen to the brass section of this B counter melody section, I think that really shines through. Here it is. And of course the trumpets are also in there doing kind of like a counter melody thing as well, just to really have the brass firing on all cylinders. So that is my quick analysis into the MIDI of His Dark Materials by Lorne Balfe. If you want to download the MIDI files yourself and make a mock-up like I did, it's one Google away. If you just Google like Lorne Balfe MIDI files, His Dark Materials, you'll find it. And if you do download it, be sure to make a charitable donation to one of the charities he mentions, because it's a pretty big thing for him to give these away for free, and I'm very appreciative. So a huge big thanks to Lorne Balfe for sharing these MIDI files in the first place, so we could all get a look at how a professional A-list composer approaches the task of writing a TV opening. Until next time, I'll see you soon.